In today's video, we're going to walk through how to create a GitLab Group job type in Jenkins. Are you new here? If you are, welcome. And if you are new here, you don't know who I am. My name is Darren Pope, and I'm a developer advocate for CloudBees. When you've worked with GitLab in the past with Jenkins, and you were creating pipeline jobs, you were probably creating pipeline jobs on a branch by project basis. With a GitLab group, we can create one single job, point it at that group, and anytime a new project comes online that follows the rules that we have set up, all the pipeline jobs will be automatically created and managed for you. This is all made possible by the GitLab Branch Source plugin. So here's what we're running today. I have a Jenkins controller that's running version 2.277.1. When it was created using install suggested plugins. Once the controller came up, I also installed one extra plugin, and that is the GitLab Branch Source plugin. At the time of the recording, the version of that plugin is 1.5.4. Connected to the controller, I have an agent with the label of Linux, and I also have a tunnel set up via ngrok so I can receive webhooks from gitlab.com. If you are using a self-managed GitLab, the setup instructions should be the same, but if you run into any problems, be sure to refer to the documentation for the GitLab Branch Source plugin down below this video. Here you can see that I have two projects within GitLab. I have a Micro 1 project and a Micro 2 project. Inside of both of these projects are just a README file, and that's all. Nothing else, just a README. If you want to see that as well for the Micro 2, we can see here that Micro 2 is also just a README. Before we can get started working inside of our controller, there are a couple of things that we need to do over on the GitLab side. Specifically, we need to create a personal access token, and we need to create an SSH key so that we will be able to check out our code, even though our code right now is just a README. So we'll go over to the user settings and click on Edit Profile, and we will click on Access Tokens. I'm going to give it a name of Jenkins-Darren Pope. I'm also going to set it to expire. And according to the GitLab Branch Source plugin documentation, the only scope that we need to add is API. So we will select API and then click on Create Personal Access Token. Right here at the top is the value of that personal access token. So I'm copying that and putting it off to the side. Now what we need to do is create an SSH key. So we'll come back over here and click on SSH Key. And what we need to do is we need to paste in the public SSH key. Now I have already gone ahead and created an SSH key pair, and in my buffer I have my public key. I'm going to set it to expire at the same time as my personal access token. Let's click on Add Key. And if we click on SSH keys here in the breadcrumb, we can review that, yep, sure enough, it was created just now, never been used, and it expires in a couple of days. Okay. So that's all that we need to do on the GitLab side for right now. We needed to create a personal access token, and we needed to create an SSH key. Let's go over to our controller and create two credentials that map back to both of these credentials that we just created here. So if we go over to our controller, what we'll do is we'll click on Manage Jenkins, Manage Credentials, Global, and then Add Credentials. The first credential we're going to create is the GitLab Personal Access Token. So I'm going to go and grab the token value, and I'm going to give it an ID of Jenkins-Darren Pope, and the same for the description. Click OK. That's the first credential. The second one that we need to create is our SSH username with private key. So in this case, I'm going to say the ID is Darren Pope -SSH key. The description will be the same. And the username will be Darren Pope. That is the username associated with my GitLab.com account. Now what I'm going to do is enter in the private key. So we'll click on the radio button, we'll click Add, and then I'm going to paste in my private key. I have no passphrase associated with this private key, so I'm just going to click on OK. So now we have our personal access token, and we also have our SSH username with private key. Before we can create the job, we need to do one more thing. We want to allow our controller to manage webhooks for us within GitLab. So we're going to go to Manage Jenkins, Configure System, and we're going to scroll down to the GitLab section, and we're going to configure this default GitLab server. We'll leave the name of default. The server URL is correct. Now, if you're running a self-hosted GitLab, your server URL will be different. Again, follow the instructions in case you have any questions. The credentials are going to be the GitLab Personal Access Token that we created. I'm going to select Manage Webhooks. I'm not going to check Manage System Hooks. I'm not concerned with that today. All I care about are webhooks today. We're not going to do anything with a secret token. And the root URL is going to be our ngrok URL. So I'm going to paste that down here and just take off Configure. I'm just restating it for clarity so I know that anytime the hook is coming in, it's going to go to that endpoint. So now we've created our credentials. We've configured our GitLab setup. Now we are ready to create our job. So let's click on New Item. For the item name, I'm going to name it the same name as my account, which is Darren Pope. We're going to scroll down and we're going to select the GitLab Group job type. Now, in my case, Darren Pope is actually a GitLab user, but it would work with group as well. So if we click on OK, we're going to scroll down and look at GitLab Group. So let's look at what we have here. We have servers, which is the one that we just configured where we turned on Manage Webhooks. Our checkout credentials, we're going to use Darren Pope SSH Key. And for the owner, I'm going to type in my owner ID, which is Darren Pope. After I tabbed out of that field, you may have noticed that Darren Pope is a valid user. So what happened, I typed Darren Pope, pressed tab, and it went off and authenticated using the personal access token. We can see here that we have discover branches and discover merge requests. But remember at this point, we still have not added a Jenkins file to either Micro 1 or Micro 2. So let's go ahead and click on Save. Oh, wait, before we do that, before we click on Save, let's go back over to Micro 1 and Micro 2 real quick. This will help clarify a few things probably in a few moments. Micro 1, Settings, Webhooks. Right now, there are no webhooks on Micro 1, nor, if I can get there fast enough, are there any webhooks on Micro 2. So no webhooks exist at the moment on either Micro 1 or Micro 2. Well, now let's click on Save and see what happens. So when we click on Save, a scan of the GitLab group, or in this case the GitLab user, is done. It found Micro 2. And this message is a little bit misleading when it says Jenkinsfile found, but it's a directory and not a file. What that really means is Jenkinsfile not found. It found Micro 1, but again, same thing. Jenkinsfile was not found. So let's take a look. If I click on Darren Pope now, you're going to see that I have Darren Pope, some sort of icon here, and then the folder is empty. Well, before we move on, let's go ahead and take a look at our webhooks. So if we look at the webhooks for Micro 2, we can see now that we have a webhook coming from B95, which is the address for our controller, B95. If we take a look over at Micro 1, and I'm just going to type it in, we can see here that we have the B95 as well. So when we created this job, even though we did not have a Jenkins file in either Micro 1 or Micro 2, the webhook was still created for us in both of those repositories. So once we actually create a Jenkins file in either of those repositories, they should show up here. But why is it a Jenkins file? Let's go back and look at the configuration of our job. If we scroll down to this section called Project Recognizers, we can see here that there is an item that says pipeline Jenkinsfile. The script path is Jenkinsfile. So what this means is if I find a file named Jenkinsfile in the root of the GitLab project, then that project is eligible to be part of the GitLab group. So let's go ahead and create a Jenkins file in Micro 1 to see how this works. So let's open up a shell and let's create a Jenkins file. And what you can see from here, this is a very simple Jenkins file. All it's going to do is echo out hello from Jenkinsfile, and it's going to run on the agent that has a label of Linux. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll add it. And let's go ahead and push it up. Now let's go back over to our job and see what's going on. So if I click on Darren Pope up in the breadcrumb, we can now see that the project Micro 1 was found. So if I click on that and then click on main, we can see that build number 1 for main is currently running based on the branch index that occurred right here. And we can also see that we obtained a Jenkins file from, and this is the commit hash. And if we scroll down, what we will see is echo hello from Jenkinsfile. So the Micro 1 project was picked up by this GitLab group due to the webhook coming in. It created the Micro 1 project, which is actually a multi-branch job, and it created the main branch within that multi-branch job. A way to think about it is a GitLab group is a folder of multi-branch pipelines, and a multi-branch pipeline is a folder of pipeline jobs. Now let's go ahead and create a new branch off of main, and we're going to use that as the basis for creating a merge request later on. So let's go back over to our shell. And what we're going to say is git checkout-b fix-123. And what we're going to do is we're going to push that branch up, no changes, to the project. So now if we take a look at Micro 1, we can see now that fix123 has been found. And if we take a look at the output of fix123, we can see that it's just echo hello from Jenkinsfile because we didn't make any changes. It's just the same Jenkins file that was on main is now inside of fix123. Now that we have our fix-123 branch, let's make a change to our Jenkins file that's on that branch. So let's do a vi Jenkinsfile. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 stages to this Jenkins file. So we still have our echo hello. That's still the same. We added in a stage that will only run when the branch starts with fix dash. So we would expect this stage to only run on our fix-123 branch. We also have another stage that has a conditional when the branch is mr dash. So this will only apply to merge requests. So now let's go ahead and save this, and we'll add it and commit it. Oops. Let's keep that right. And let's push it, and let's watch what happens on fix-123. So once we get our handshake back, now let's click on fix-123 in the breadcrumb. And we can see build number 2 is pending right now. And now it's running. We see our echo from Jenkinsfile. That's good. We see the cat of the README, which is what the fix dash stage does for us. And then we can see the for the mr stage was skipped due to the when conditional because fix dash does not equal mr dash. So right now we have 2 branches, main and fix-123. Now what we want to do is we want to create a merge request from fix-123 into main. So let's go back over to our project here. We're going to click on Create Merge Request. And we can see here it's going to go from fix-123 into main. I also want to make sure that we have checked Delete Source Branch when merge request is accepted. So let's go ahead and click on Submit Merge Request. When we take a look at this, what we're going to see is a merge button with a delete branch delete source branch. Let's go back over to our job for Micro 1 and see what we have now. We still have main, we still have fix-123, but we also have now a merge request 6. So if we come back over into GitLab, what we're going to see is now we have a merge request 6. So that's the mapping there. If we take a look at the output for MR6, we're going to see that we have also outputted hello. We're skipping the fix branch because mr dash does not equal fix dash. And then we also see the output for our mr stage. So this Jenkins file that we made the change on in fix-123, it did one thing differently on fix-123, and it did something different on mr dash, in this case MR6, and we still have the hello working just like normal. So at this point, what we want to do, go back over here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and click on Merge. Now before we click on it, haven't clicked on it yet, let's double check what we have here. On Micro 1, we have main, fix-123, and MR6. Let's click on Merge. Once the merge completes, we can see the changes were merged into main. Let's go back over to our controller, and we can see here that fix-123 is now obsolete, as indicated by the strike through. Same thing for the merge request because it's been merged. MR6 is now obsolete. If we want to clean up the obsoletes, we can do that just by clicking on Scan GitLab Project Now. That will automatically clean up after a certain amount of time based on how it's configured. But if you want to force it, that's a way you can force it. Let's look back at Micro 1 again. So the only branches that are left are main. Merge request, there are no merge requests around. So if we click on main and take a look at the output of build 2, then what you'll see is we have our echo, hello, and we see the skips for both the fix branch and the MR branch. Up to this point, we've spent all of our time in Micro 1. Let's go ahead and start doing some work inside of Micro 2. What we're going to be doing inside of Micro 2 is something a little bit different than what we did inside of Micro 1, just to make you think a little bit. Let's say that we want to create a Jenkins file inside of Micro 2. That part we know that we have to do. But let's not name it Jenkinsfile. Let's name it something different. What we're going to do is we are going to create a Jenkinsfile -m2. So let's open up our shell and create Jenkinsfile -m2. And this will look very similar to what we did over in Micro 1. The only major difference is that we have, instead of hello from Jenkinsfile, is Jenkinsfile -m2. Everything else is the same. So let's go ahead and save this. We are on Micro 2. Let's go ahead and add this, commit it, and let's push it. Now, what do you think is going to happen? If you go back to the project recognizers that we saw earlier, the only project recognizer that we have is Jenkinsfile. Although the contents of this Jenkinsfile m2 is a valid Jenkins file, the name of the file isn't Jenkinsfile. It's something else. In this case, it's Jenkinsfile -m2. So what we're going to see when we come back over to our job is that Micro 2 was not found. So in order for this job to work, we need to reconfigure. Let's go down to Project Recognizers. We're going to add pipeline Jenkinsfile, and we're going to say Jenkinsfile -m2. And let's click on Save. Now, when we click on Save, it's going to do a scan of the group, or in my case, the user, looking for both Jenkinsfile and Jenkinsfile m2. So we can see here that Jenkinsfile m2 was found. So when we come back over here, Micro 2 was found on the main branch. If we take a look at the output, we can see that the hello is hello from Jenkinsfile m2. Now let's do something a little bit tricky. Right now, when we take a look at the configuration of this job, we can see that our project recognizers are in order Jenkinsfile and Jenkinsfile m2. At this point, Micro 1, looking at the log, Micro 1 is using Jenkinsfile. That's this section right here. So all of this is Micro 1. So Jenkinsfile found. And then here for Micro 2, which is longer, it didn't find Jenkinsfile, but it found Jenkinsfile m2. So if we were to add a Jenkinsfile to our Micro 2 repository, what's going to happen? Is the Jenkinsfile going to run when we commit that Jenkinsfile, or is the Jenkinsfile m2 going to run as it continues on? Let's see what happens. So we haven't made any changes yet. Let's go over to Micro 2 and let's make a copy of our Jenkinsfile m2, and we're going to copy it to Jenkinsfile. And let's edit Jenkinsfile, and let's get rid of the m2. So now our Jenkinsfile and Jenkinsfile m2 are effectively the same file, except the echo statement is a little different. Let's go ahead and add Jenkinsfile. Whoops. I knew something looked weird there. M, and then git push. Okay. So now if we look at the build that just started for main, we can see it's pending. we can see here that it is still using M2. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense because I have a Jenkins file and a Jenkinsfile M2 in Micro 2. When the project was last scanned, the value that was scanned and written was Jenkinsfile-M2. Although we added a Jenkins file, since the GitLab group has not been rescanned yet, the Micro 2 multi-branch job that's within the GitLab group is unaware of the existence of the Jenkins file. So in order for Micro 2 to pick up and use the Jenkins file, what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to force a scan of the GitLab group now. So we'll do that. And then let's take a look at the log output. We're scanning Micro 2. And now we can see that the Jenkins file is found. As the project recognizers are processed, they are processed in order. So if you think back to how we have it configured, it's Jenkins file first, and then Jenkinsfile M2 second. So once we find a match in our project recognizers, we're done. You'll notice here that Micro 2 is really short this time, whereas before with M2, when we checked for M2, it first checked for Jenkins file, it didn't find anything, and then it went ahead and said, okay, is there a Jenkins file M2? Yes, there was, then it matched out at that point. Now, since there's a Jenkins file inside of our project, it was able to match on Jenkins file first, and now it's going to completely ignore the existence of the Jenkins file M2. Nothing has changed inside of Micro 1. Now, if we go back over to Micro 2, the job did not automatically run that time. So let's go ahead and click on Build Now. And if we take a look at the output of 3, what you're going to see here is it was obtained from Jenkinsfile and not from Jenkinsfile M2. And we can verify that from the output of our job. Now let's say we wanted to reorder and have M2 be first in our project recognizers. Let's see what that would look like. So we'll go back to Configure. We'll go down to our project recognizers, and I'm going to grab Jenkinsfile and put it below Jenkinsfile M2. So now it's Jenkinsfile M2 and then Jenkinsfile. Let's click Save. Now this time when I click Save, it's going to scan the repositories, because that's what happens when you make a change. So we can see here that Micro 2 was found, and it found M2 first. So right now, this is all of Micro 2. If we take a look at Micro 1 now, Micro 1 is the one that is longer. It first checks for Jenkinsfile M2, it didn't find it, but then it found Jenkinsfile. So if we go back over now again to Micro 2, what we're going to see is, once we do a build now, we're going to see that build number 4 is now using Jenkinsfile-M2. We were able to create a single job, point it at a GitLab group, in our case a GitLab user. It was able to bring in all of the projects that we wanted to build. Because we'd put in a Jenkins file or Jenkinsfile M2 in our Micro 2 case, and as we added the new branches and got the Jenkins files in the right place, the branches automatically showed up within the job. As branches were obsoleted, deleted, they disappeared from within the job. So the GitLab group job type that is offered through the GitLab branch source plugin is a time saver. It gives you the ability as either a Jenkins administrator or as somebody that's just managing jobs. It frees up your time that you're able to focus on other valuable things within your organization. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBeesDevs. If this video was helpful to you, please consider leaving us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, Click on that subscribe button and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified automatically anytime there is new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.